Did you know that the highest rated game of all time according to Metacritic is The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time? For many people, for many years, this game has been talked about as the greatest game ever made. For myself personally, I've always held it as my personal favorite game of all time, at least until Breath of the Wild. And even during most of these years of the Switch era, I've kind of debated, is it Ocarina of Time, is it Breath of the Wild? And it was only recently, this year, that I decided that Breath of the Wild is my personal favorite game of all time before getting into Tears of the Kingdom. Point is, The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time has a certain prestige to it. It is considered one of gaming's greats. And that's why what I wanted to talk about today has me very excited. This is an idea I've had in mind for a while. If you've been watching the channel, I've already been talking about the idea of a Zelda remake, but I think the Zelda game that is going to be remade is Ocarina of Time. That's my bet. That is my prediction. And it's not just because a few different rumors have popped up this week. You may have seen a couple, and this video was actually planned before the most recent rumor on this topic popped up yesterday. Just look at the video I uploaded on November 2nd. I was playing Ocarina of Time in the background for that video the entire time. And if you watched my podcast on Monday, I was already hinting at this idea. And also Nintendo Prime's podcast last Wednesday as well. I think Nintendo may very well be planning the best possible remake, which is one of the greatest games ever made, The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. Why do I think this? Well, that's what we're talking about today. Before delving into today's video, I would first like to thank Teases for sponsoring today's video and also providing me with these hybrid ANC Bowie MA10 true wireless earphones. These earphones coming in at an affordable price I've actually come to enjoy very much. And personally, it's always been a little bit tricky with me putting in earphones or earbuds, because I guess there's just something about my ears, they're shaped a bit differently where they're always falling out. With these, I was able to find a nice snug fit for me personally. They do come with a few different accessories to fit your ears in different ways, but it fit me just fine, and I found myself using these earbuds in a variety of different ways. I took them for a jog, I would use them to listen to podcasts, listen to music. It all works pretty well. Now, there are some interesting features about these earbuds. You can control them by tapping them on the sides in various ways. They do have some level of active noise cancellation, hence the title ANC. The battery life is pretty significant. They tout 140 hours, and I haven't charged it yet, and they've still been going for weeks on end. And when you do want to charge them, all you have to do is put them back in this little capsule that they provide, which also holds its own charge that you can charge as well by plugging it in. So it's all nicely kept together. It's a very neat package. It even has a waterproofing of IPX6, and I would like to clarify, waterproof and not just water resistant. Water resistant isn't waterproof. If you throw it in the water, it will resist it for only so much amount of time. Waterproof, it's gonna hold it for a fair bit more. IPX6 is pretty darn good. If you ever find yourself getting caught in the rain while on a jog, or if you get tossed into a pool while listening to music, these earbuds will do just fine. You will have nothing to worry about in terms of them getting damaged. So I've come to really enjoy these earbuds. They are practical and I think they're a pretty good deal. So please check them out by clicking the link in the description below or in the pinned comment and using my discount code MA10U to get 48% off. Thank you again to Teases for sponsoring today's video. Welcome everyone, this is Andres Restart, and today we are talking about how Nintendo may be remaking The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. Now this week we've been talking about some type of Zelda remaster or remake getting announced fairly soon. And the reason that's happened is because Dr. Serkan Toto, an industry analyst who's known to have a lot of know-how on what's going on with the industry, including Nintendo, put out a teaser earlier this week where he said ZR 2023. And then the tweet was deleted quite quickly. But there's a history to this because in the past, right before we saw Nintendo's Direct, he teased Z2 2022, which was him hinting at the Tears of the Kingdom trailer, which at the time was saying it was going to be coming out in 2022. Of course, it was delayed. Point is, he's teased it before, and in the same fashion, he's teasing it now. Some type of Zelda content, it seems, based off the ZR 2023. It's in the same style. And ZR, many have interpreted to mean Zelda Remake, or maybe Zelda Remaster, or maybe Zelda Reveal. These are possibilities. But what makes this even more interesting is that another rumor popped up yesterday, and I want to clarify that I had no intention of talking about this particular leaker, and I say that with air quotes because I do think they have a very spotty record, but they were correct about the Mario Wonder Direct not too long ago. So since we're talking about the subject anyways, I'm just mentioning it. Zippo is saying Ocarina of Time is coming. He says in his blog post yesterday, he will return. The Hero of Time will return in the very near future. That's it, that's the post. This particular person has had a spotty record, so I'm not putting too much stock into this. But it's interesting that we're hearing from another place that something Zelda is happening, especially because if we go a few months back, Jeff Grubb also said that he heard that something Zelda is happening later this year that's not Tears of the Kingdom related. But when this was said, when he heard about this was well after this was already announced for NSO. So to think his inside source told him this, not realizing that Oracle of Ages and Seasons wasn't already announced for Nintendo Switch Online, to me, seems unlikely. And Jeff Grubb did talk about this on Twitter when the games were finally released. He made mention that this might have been it, but if you read the thread, he also says, well, no, maybe it wasn't it. But he doesn't want people to put too much stock into the rumor because he doesn't have a lot of sourcing on it, and in the past he was wrong about something Zelda related, so he's just being very cautious about trying to raise people's expectations here. Point is that he did hear from someone that something Zelda related is coming this year, and I don't think that person would be so dumb to think that they were providing inside information when this is public information from way beforehand. Of course, we should still take it with a grain of salt because it's one source, plans can change, and sometimes things can get lost in translation. But as I said in the exposition for this video, the reason why I'm talking about this idea is not because of the rumors. A few weeks back, before this recent rumor train of a Zelda remake, I made a video talking about how I think a Zelda remake is very likely. I talked about how there was a trademark for Ocarina of Time, and we never quite saw the answer to that. I talked about how Grezzo likely is working on another project. We don't know what that is, but considering their history, there's a solid chance it could be something Zelda related. And I also talked about how there's this history of when Nintendo closes out a generation with a major Zelda, early on into that next system they put out some type of Zelda remaster that showcases the system. Some examples: the DS ended with Spirit Tracks, and in the first year of 3DS, they came out with Ocarina of Time 3D. The Wii ended with Skyward Sword, and in the first year of Wii U, we got Wind Waker HD. So with Tears of the Kingdom coming out late into Switch generation, what could be coming out in the first year and a half or so for the Switch 2? I think some type of Zelda remaster or remake, maybe an enhancement of Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild, maybe a remastering of Twilight Princess and Wind Waker, but more so than what they were already done on Wii U, or maybe a proper remake since most of the traditional 3D Zeldas have already been remastered, and the first in line is Ocarina of Time. But there's something that popped up recently that's now making me think that this is even more likely. So I would like to point you to this interview from Nintendo Dream Magazine. It's a Japanese magazine that interviewed the Zelda producer Eiji Aonuma and Zelda director Hidemaru Fujibayashi. And there's a part where they talk about Rauru. Now, this is a rough translation, so the text looks a little bit different, but let me just read this for you. By the way, the new character of the Zonai tribe is Rauru. I was surprised to see such a familiar name. Is there an intentional part? Fujibayashi. His name comes from his role. For the Zelda series, Rauru is in the position of being a guiding figure. In this work, as Princess Zelda's further growth is depicted, she is guided by the king and queen of the country's founding era in the past world. When we wonder what kind of person would be suitable for such a role, we decide to select someone by the name of Rauru. I understand it's saying Raul, but I think this is a translation issue, but I will say, the name Raul does mean wolf counselor, so it's interesting that they're talking about Rauru being this guiding figure for Princess Zelda and our hero Link. But this is the part that really got me thinking. What Aonuma says. When I first heard that he would be called Rauru, I thought it was a very natural progression. but I wonder how many of the people currently playing Tears actually know about the character Rauru. And then he says, LOL. So I know that some people are going to read this or hear me going to say that and say there's nothing there, but I beg to differ. And I say this knowing full well there's a chance that Aonuma isn't teasing something here, but even if he isn't, I still think it means something. But for the sake of argument, let's say that he might be, because there is a history of Aonuma teasing future Zeldas. One great example is him teasing Skyward Sword for Switch. He was at a Zelda conference in front of a whole bunch of people, and he said something along the lines of Skyward Sword on Switch, right? And it took a few years, but Skyward Sword HD did come to Nintendo Switch. So with there being a history, and this possibility that he might be teasing something, what would he be teasing here? Well, he's talking about how the fan base doesn't know who Rauru is from Ocarina of Time, because that's where Rauru comes from. Rauru in Tears of the Kingdom is not the first Rauru we've seen in the Zelda series. So here he's talking about how he thought Rauru was very fitting for what he understood of the initial character Rauru. But then it also goes on to say that he doesn't think fans today would understand who that is, which is odd because Ocarina of Time 3D came out not so long ago. Well, I suppose that is a relative term because it came out back in 2011, which was more than 12 years ago. But the point here is that he's referencing a game where people don't know too much about this, so perhaps there may be something in the future where current Zelda fans will learn more about this. And I think that's important to understand here. There is a much larger new Zelda audience that doesn't understand prior Zelda games. So maybe Nintendo would be interested in finding a way to bring back some of these Zeldas for this newer, larger Zelda audience. But now let's operate under the assumption that this isn't him teasing anything, not intentionally. It at the very least is telling us that the producer of the Zelda series doesn't think Ocarina of Time 3D is relevant or remembered for the current fan base. So this argument that one might make, well, they already remastered Ocarina of Time with the Ocarina of Time 3D on the Nintendo 3DS, there's not really a need to go back to it. Well, based off what we're hearing here, a lot of Tears of the Kingdom players wouldn't even know much about that game, so it would actually be pretty relevant, at least based off Aonuma's perspective here. Because there's been a lot of talk and debate about the story of Tears of the Kingdom and the lore details. A lot of the Zelda fanbase has been going back and forth on the quality of Tears of the Kingdom, and there's been a lot of details in the story for Tears of the Kingdom that are up for interpretation. And there are some elements that seem to be at least light references to Ocarina of Time. One of the best examples that comes to mind to me is the inclusion of the characters TOTK and Koeme. So these two characters are the witches that help to raise Ganondorf from Ocarina of Time. But what's interesting is that they are old ancient witches in Ocarina of Time, however, in the flashback story for Tears of the Kingdom, they are young Gerudo women by the side of this iteration of Ganondorf. They don't have any dialogue, but they are by his side, showing that they carry some level of importance. And I personally have theorized that they may very well be the same TOTK and Koeme that after 400 years or so, age up to be the witches, raise a new Ganondorf, and that's what we see in the events of Ocarina of Time. Now, that is a theory, it is unconfirmed, but the point is, there's a lot of story details and lore that perhaps could be more greatly enriched or have holes more appropriately answered if Nintendo were to go back to, say, for example, Ocarina of Time and retell it with Tears of the Kingdom in mind. And what I find even more interesting about this idea is that Nintendo has confirmed that there are no DLC plans for Tears of the Kingdom. They're just moving on to the next project. But if Nintendo were to put out a remake of Ocarina of Time, this wouldn't be an 100-hour campaign. A shorter Zelda stint, but still something significant, something more comparable to what we maybe see, for example, in the Xenoblade series, the DLC campaigns that are substantial campaigns compared to most other games, but compared to the Xenoblade series, would be small. So what if we got an Ocarina of Time remake instead of getting Tears of the Kingdom DLC, and because it's a retelling of the story, but with modern Zeldas in mind, like Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, there can be details here that can help plug up some of the holes or settle some of the debates about the current story and lore presented in Tears of the Kingdom. So there's a lot of reason to go back to a Zelda game, for lore reasons, to show this much newer Zelda fanbase prior major Zelda games, but also going into the next system, given that Tears of the Kingdom is already out, Nintendo will need something Zelda to bring in more Zelda fans. I've seen a lot of Zelda fans talk about how they're probably not going to get Switch 2 until there's some sort of major Zelda project, and given that Tears of the Kingdom has just come out, and the development cycles for both Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom were for over half a decade, we're a long ways off before the next major open world Zelda, so putting out something like an Ocarina of Time remake would bring over a lot of fans. Now, the rumor is for 2023. I'm assuming a tease or reveal if this is indeed true, and I'm thinking potentially the Game Awards, which would be exciting, but I'm not saying this would be necessarily an exclusive for the Switch 2. I think more likely it would be a cross-gen game if it's getting announced this year. Perhaps something like Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door, which at this current point in time we don't know if it's a cross-gen game or not because we don't know about any games for Switch 2, not from Nintendo at least. But given that that's a remake of a GameCube game, and that they're using a button overlay that's not for the Nintendo GameCube or for the Nintendo Switch, that matches this new color button style that's reminiscent of the Super Famicom, an iterative system, there's some speculation that maybe the Switch 2 has these colored buttons. So with Paper Mario 1000 Door having it, maybe this is a cross-gen game. We shall see, of course. I don't know if Paper Mario 1000 Door will be a cross-gen game. I don't know if Switch 2 will have the colored buttons like Super Famicom. And I don't know if Nintendo is planning Ocarina of Time to be remade. But based off history, Nintendo's going to do something with Zelda early on to Switch 2. That I feel confident in. What that will be, that remains to be seen. And there are some people out there with pretty good track records, not all of them, but some of them, suggesting something Zelda is coming soon. So as a Zelda fan, I'm excited. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. This is Andre's Restart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I'll see you all really soon. Take care.